Back home again to the 12 after our journey up to the farm. 1st of November. Isn't that beautiful? Just gorgeous. Old Mitty been down to have a drink. Water levels really are, I have never seen them this low. It really is quite amazing and almost alarming at how much the water has dropped. Now that bench that you're seeing there was the previous low water mark, and it's a good 16 inches below that now. So we really are getting into some very, very serious dry conditions. Most of the birds have gone. Nobody left that I can see. This is the only other bird floating around. So this morning we are going to light the cook stove in the cabin. Abby Ann is coming to stay tonight, so I need to get the heat on. And it's that time of the year when we should be starting work in the cabin anyway, as the frost is starting to set the ground hard, making life a little more difficult for the earth moving. So let's go light her up. So this place has become storage over the summer. So we have to get in here and start clearing out. Now those of you who follow us will know that we run a couple of these old stoves. The Sultan is in the other cabin, and this one we just used in here as a stopgap stove. As you can see, this is a Master Climax, another Guelph stove from Ontario, Canada. And stoves are, you know, people think, well, a stove's a stove, but they're not. They're just as different as you and I, and each one has their own characters and quirks, if you will. So this morning we're going to get her lit up and see if we can get some heat going. Now the most important thing when lighting the stove is to get the chimney as warm as you can, as quickly as you can. So to do that, I have stuffed the firebox with quite a bit of paper, and we'll get some kindling in there and see if we can get a good hot fire going up the chimney as quick as we can. Now we throw in some kindling, little sticks, some old OSB, anything to get some heat going up the chimney and make it draw. And this stove requires a lot more draw than the other one. The Sultan will just, it's incredible, it will just take off and go and run beautifully. This one, being a little bit older, perhaps wasn't designed with quite the same efficiency. So there we are, that should be a good start. I'm a great believer in the torch to get things going. Okay. We'll open the front vent. Maybe open the side vent a little too, just to try to get some air underneath the fire. Now you can see this is what happens when the chimney is cold. The smoke is not drawn up. So that's why it's so important to try to get a good hot fire going as quickly as you can. And then we're away to the races. Woohoo! Okay, let's take a look. Oh, you can hear she's going good. Look at that. She's even drawing in this ring, so that will get some heat up the chimney, and once the flue is warm, then we can throttle her back a bit. You see the damper is wide open on the chimney there. And this is a fairly straight chimney, just a little bit of a dogleg there, and then it stands about another 4 or 5 feet above the roof line. Normally we would keep these side dampers closed. Now this one has a little opening here, and we presume this was to shovel coal in when you had pots and pans on the range. You could just open this shovel of coal in there, didn't have to interfere. Now we think this stove is a little bit older than the Sultan, and the Sultan we think is just around the Second World War, maybe a little bit pre-war. This one we think is a little bit older, mostly because this side of the stove is cast iron, not tin. And you can see through the cracks there that they were not exactly airtight. But they are quite an amazing contraption, and we would never be without our stoves. So we'll come back in a minute, see what the fire looks like, and if we can get some coal started in there. Now the stove's been running for about 10 minutes with everything wide open, the chimney, the dampers, everything. I've just closed it down a little bit, and you can see it's going fairly well. It's fairly mellow, and you can't keep your hand on the flue, so she's good and hot. Now if we ran the Sultan like that for that length of time wide open, the fire would be up the chimney and going across the countryside, running happily and merrily, because it's like a blast furnace in that thing. This stove is completely different. Much more difficult to get going. So we're going to put some coal in there now. This is lump coal, straight out of the face. We do keep some big stuff for overnight. Usually it's more this small size coal. So we'll drop a lump or two in there. Just to get her merrily going with some hot coals in the bottom. We usually keep the coal in the back of the fire, and the reason for that is the coals will give a long, steady heat. But if you decide you want a pot of coffee or some hot water or tea or something, if you keep the front of the firebox running on wood, you can just throw some dry wood in there and you have instant heat. Whereas if you're trying to get coals fired up, if you had the whole box full of coals, it would be much slower to build a heat. You can maintain heat easier with coals, but if you want an instant blast, you need to get some wood. So we've just learnt to run the coals at the back, keep the front a little more empty and ready for some wood. So we'll let that get going in there for another 20 minutes, half an hour, and we come back and we should have some nice coals going. So she's warming up nicely. Just take a look in here. You can see she's starting to settle down to a steady glow. The coals are starting to light up and she's coming along nicely. Now, we do have a thermometer on the front of the oven. It's not registering yet, but normally we leave the oven open. Oh, it's pretty warm in there. And that just lets the heat radiate more into the room. So we're going to throttle this thing down a bit now. And to do that, we will close the chimney damper. And with this stove, you close it until you see smoke start to come up between the rings. There it goes. So you know that's too much. So you crack her open a little bit more, and there we are. So that is where we'll keep that one. And there is another damper which slides across the chimney outlet there. It's right round the back, and we'll close that one down as well. So the idea being that the heat and the chimney exhaust, instead of going straight out the back and up the chimney, you close off this door in the back with the rear damper, and then the heat and the exhaust has to cross over the top of the oven, go down the side, across the bottom, and out the back. And if you come around here, you will see that the chimney runs right down to the bottom down here, and that is why. That is the exhaust coming out the back of the stove, down here, and then coming up. So with this little trap door closed off, the fire has to take the long way home. Go right around, and of course, in doing so, the heat is transferred into the oven, into the cooktop. It's quite an ingenious design. Works very well. So we'll close the trap door so as the heat has to start going around, and we'll just let her do her thing. Time to go have a cup of tea, I do believe. So there we are, back again after about an hour. Let's take a look in there. You can see it's just glowing nicely. And that's the kind of fire we like to keep going. Just overnight be perfect. Keep it just toasty. I've had the door closed for a little bit, showing about 200 degrees in there. So there we are. That's how we fire up the stove. We enjoy them very much. They're a little bit of work, but still, anybody who walks in on a stove like that, they say, wow, I remember my grandma, and stories like that. They still have a lot of romanticism about them. And even if they are a little bit of work, the chimneys must be kept cleaned religiously. But beyond that, what's not to love? Evening has fallen. Abby Ann has arrived. So let's go in and take a look at what things look like now. We got the lights on in here. Mum has made a bed for her. Abby Ann just comes and crashes overnight, even though we're in construction mode. With the stove cranked up here, what are we at? 125? Something like that. The stove has settled down now. I've put in a few lumps of coal. Oh yeah, it's just going very slowly. And if we look at the thermometer, about 65 Fahrenheit. So there we are. Abby Ann and Juno will be snug as a bug in here tonight. Thanks to the old stove. Just a nice way to live. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please feel free to check out our others.